I had spent the last 5 years climbing the corporate ladder, pouring every ounce of energy into my career, believing that dedication and competence were enough to earn respect. At 32, I was proud of what I had accomplished, leading successful projects, mentoring junior colleagues, and building a reputation as someone reliable and innovative. My ambition wasn't just about money or titles. It was about proving to myself that I could excel in a world that often undervalued quiet determination. The million-dollar presentation looming that week felt like the culmination of years of meticulous effort. The chance to showcase not only our team's capabilities, but also my ability to command respect in a high-stakes environment. Most of my coworkers admired me. They trusted my judgment, sought my advice, and often deferred to my perspective in meetings. Yet, despite the cordial smiles and polite nods, I could feel subtle undercurrents. It was Elaine who unsettled me most. She had joined the team a year ago, radiating charm and confidence, and quickly became a favorite of our upper management. There was an almost magnetic quality to her interactions. She smiled, laughed at jokes, and knew exactly what to say to ingratiate herself. I should have been relieved another competent colleague would make the presentation smoother, but instead, a subtle tension gnawed at me whenever she was around. There were fleeting moments, too brief to accuse, when she'd correct a detail I had painstakingly prepared, or offer alternative phrasing in meetings with a tone that suggested my ideas were naive. I brushed it off, telling myself it was harmless office rivalry, that I had survived worse scrutiny in my career. Still, a quiet unease settled in, a sense that Elaine's ambition might one day collide with mine in ways I wasn't ready to handle. Despite that, I felt confident. The presentation was a culmination of weeks of strategy, research, and collaboration, a showcase meant to impress not just our clients, but the executives who held my career in their hands. I reviewed every slide, every speaking point, rehearsed every answer to potential questions, and envisioned the room full of attentive clients hanging on my every word. I imagined the nods of approval, the subtle acknowledgement that this was my moment, that all the hours, all the sacrifices had led to this. There was pride in knowing I had earned my position, pride in having the respect of those around me, even those I suspected might harbor envy. The stakes felt enormous. This wasn't just a presentation. It was a chance to secure a multi-million-dollar contract, elevate our team's standing, and cement my reputation as someone who could handle pressure with poise and intelligence. My nerves were present, yes, but they were mingled with anticipation and determination. I believed that competence and preparation could outweigh any underhanded attempts to undermine me. Yet, the tension with Elaine lingered at the edges of my thoughts, a shadow I couldn't entirely ignore. I could sense that while I focused on the bigger picture, she might be plotting her own narrative, one that could clash with mine when it mattered most. That thought, small and flickering at first, was enough to keep me vigilant, quietly preparing for a storm I couldn't yet see coming. It started with the little things, almost imperceptible at first. Elaine would accidentally leave me out of email threads, or subtly misstate deadlines in front of our team, making me scramble to cover what I should have already known. She had this uncanny way of speaking in meetings that made her corrections sound helpful, even when they undermined me. "Oh, I thought you meant X instead of Y," she would say with a sweet smile, as if the mistake was entirely mine. I found myself pausing, questioning whether I had truly overlooked something. But deep down, I knew the pattern was deliberate. Office gossip added another layer of tension. Whispers floated around the break room about who would lead the presentation, about who was really responsible for which parts of the project. Elaine's name came up frequently, always accompanied by laughter or knowing glances. I tried to brush it off, but this subtle dig stung. A comment about my unconventional approach, a colleague praising her fresh perspective while leaving my contributions unmentioned. It was exhausting to constantly defend my competence while maintaining a polite smile. Every interaction felt like navigating a minefield, careful not to give her any opening to twist my words or make me look incompetent. Then there were the small humiliations, moments designed to make me doubt myself. She would casually question my analysis in front of others, never aggressively, just enough to seed uncertainty. During a review meeting, she interrupted me mid-sentence, finishing my point with a smirk that suggested only she truly understood the material. Each instance was minor on its own, but collectively, they started to weigh heavily, chipping away at my confidence. I realized the presentation was no longer just a professional challenge. It had become a battleground where her manipulations could shape perceptions before I even had a chance to speak. By midweek, the atmosphere in the office had shifted. Colleagues whispered in hushed tones, some offering faint sympathy, others subtly aligning themselves with Elaine. I could feel eyes on me during casual conversations, measuring, judging, waiting for a misstep. The sense of unease intensified with each passing day, a creeping suspicion that the $1 million presentation I had meticulously prepared for was under threat not by circumstances, but by someone I had trusted as a teammate. The thought was chilling. Every slide I perfected, every word I rehearsed, could be twisted or sabotaged at the last moment, turning my proudest achievement into a public failure. Even as I tried to focus on the content, I couldn't shake the feeling that Elaine was orchestrating something larger. A carefully plotted disruption meant to humiliate me at the worst possible moment. Her charm made it almost impossible to call her out without seeming paranoid. The tension in the office was palpable, the stakes higher than ever. Something told me the disaster was already set in motion, and by the time I realized the full extent, it would be too late to stop it. I spent the next few days holed up in my apartment, surrounded by printouts, spreadsheets, and half-empty coffee cups, rehearsing every line of the presentation until my voice felt raw. My mind oscillated between excitement and a gnawing fear that no amount of preparation could shield me from Elaine's subtle sabotage. I pictured the conference room, the elite client's discerning eyes, and the weight of the contract hanging on every word I would speak. What if a single misstep overshadowed all the work I had poured into this project? The thought made my stomach tighten, and yet beneath it was a thrill, a pulse of adrenaline that reminded me why I loved the challenge in the first place. Memories of past betrayals crept in as I reviewed my slides. The promotion I'd last to a coworker who took credit for my late nights. The project where a colleague twisted my ideas into something that reflected poorly on me. Those moments stung fresh. Even years later, I remembered being dismissed in meetings, overlooked in casual conversations, and underestimated in ways that felt personal, though I tried to rationalize them as the nature of office politics. Each flashback ignited a quiet resolve. I would not be humiliated again, not when the stakes were this high. Still, doubt lingered. I caught myself pacing, repeating phrases aloud, questioning whether I had anticipated every angle, every possible disruption. Elaine's presence in my thoughts was constant. Her smirk, the way she subtly corrected me, the effortless way she seemed to manipulate others' perceptions. Could I outmaneuver her without revealing my anxiety? The tension felt suffocating, a mix of fear, determination, and excitement that refused to settle. I longed to tell someone, anyone, about the unease gnawing at me, but I knew it would make me look paranoid, weak, or unprepared. Then, late one evening, my inbox pinged. A new email appeared. Subject line: "You should double-check the deck before Friday." With no sender name, I clicked it, heart pounding, only to find a single sentence. "Some of your slides won't survive the room. Watch your back." My fingers hovered over the keyboard, frozen, as a chill ran through me. Was it a warning, a prank, or something far worse? The uncertainty made my pulse spike. I knew, instinctively, that the presentation I had envisioned as a triumph might already be teetering on the edge of disaster. The morning of the presentation, I walked into the conference room with a mixture of adrenaline and dread, trying to steady my racing heart. The room smelled faintly of polished wood and expensive coffee, and the elite clients were already seated, murmuring quietly among themselves. I set up my laptop, double-checked my notes, and forced a confident smile, determined to project competence. But the moment Elaine stepped in, her presence shifted the energy. She greeted everyone warmly, laughing at jokes I didn't hear, and leaning just enough into the spotlight to remind everyone she belonged there too. As I began speaking, my carefully rehearsed introduction was interrupted by a slight change that I hadn't initiated. I froze for a second, heart thumping, as my mind scrambled to comprehend what had just happened. The graph showing our projections was altered figures slightly skewed, phrasing subtly misleading, and a lean, sweet, helpful voice cut in. "I thought it might be clearer this way," she said, glancing at the clients with a smile that hit a sting. Murmurs spread through the room, and I could feel the clients' eyes flicker from confusion to doubt. My words faltered as I tried to correct the discrepancy without appearing flustered, but the damage had already begun. With every slide, she found a way to insert a correction, a suggestion, or a critique that made me question my own work. Questions came from clients that she had subtly planted during previous conversations, designed to make me stumble. I could hear the polite nods and murmured agreements from some colleagues who either didn't realize the manipulation or were unwilling to intervene. My mind raced as I tried to regain control, my throat tight, hands trembling slightly, and a wave of panic threatened to overtake me. Each moment of hesitation felt like it was magnified, a glaring spotlight on every perceived weakness. The FOMO hit hard. I realized everyone in the room, from the clients to my coworkers, was witnessing what looked like my failure. My professional status, carefully cultivated over years, seemed to teeter in real time. Elaine's calm confidence only highlighted my nervous energy, and I could feel my reputation sliding with every whispered comment and pointed question. I fought to steady my voice, to anchor myself in the hours of preparation, but the tension was suffocating. Every nod of approval she received, every subtle correction she offered, felt like a personal blow. By the halfway point, I was sweating, fumbling through notes I knew by heart hammering as embarrassment flushed my face. I caught glimpses of the clients exchanging glances, and I knew the presentation, meant to showcase my capabilities and cement trust, was spiraling into a public spectacle of humiliation. The sting of being undermined by someone I had once considered a peer, amplified by the audience's subtle reactions, made my blood boil and my stomach knot. I realized with a sinking certainty that this was more than a presentation. It was a carefully orchestrated trap, and I was in the center of it, powerless to stop the immediate fallout. I left the conference room feeling hollow, as if someone had carved out a piece of me and left it behind on the polished floor. My legs felt like lead, my hands still trembling from the humiliation I had just endured. In the hallway, whispers followed me like shadows, faint at first, then louder as coworkers exchanged sly smiles and knowing glances. "Did you see how she messed up the projection?" someone murmured, and another added, "I wonder if she'll recover from that slip." Each word felt like a dagger, carving doubt into my confidence and making me question every choice I had made leading up to this moment. Sitting at my desk, I replayed the presentation endlessly in my mind. Every stutter, every pause, every slide that had been altered without my knowledge became magnified in slow motion. I remembered past moments when I had been dismissed, underestimated, or overlooked, and now those memories collided with the present, forming a wall of self-doubt and shame. I couldn't shake the feeling that my reputation had been quietly eroded in front of the people whose opinions mattered most. Anger simmered under the surface, hot and sharp, mixing with a bitter sense of betrayal. Even my closest colleagues kept their distance, polite but distant, offering sympathetic smiles that rang hollow. Some glanced at me with curiosity, as if waiting for the next mistake. Others whispered quietly, forming alliances I couldn't see but could feel. I realized, painfully, that professional respect was fragile and easily undermined. My accomplishments suddenly felt tenuous, like sand slipping through my fingers, and the thought that my career might suffer consequences for someone else's manipulation made my chest tighten. I sat back, staring at my empty coffee cup, and felt a heavy isolation settle over me. The office, usually buzzing with familiar energy, now felt alien and hostile. Rage mixed with despair, a cocktail of emotions that made it difficult to think clearly. How had it come to this? How had someone I worked alongside, someone I thought was a peer, weaponized subtlety to dismantle my standing? The sting of betrayal burned hotter than the embarrassment itself. I realized that my next steps would be crucial, whether I sank under the weight of this humiliation or found a way to reclaim my dignity. By the next morning, I knew I couldn't let what happened define me. Sitting alone in my apartment, I spread out notes, emails, and slide drafts, trying to piece together a clear record of the sabotage. Every altered statistic, every subtle correction Aline had inserted, became a piece of evidence, a roadmap of how she had manipulated the presentation. I even revisited past incidents, the small betrayals I had previously brushed off, the time she had quietly shifted responsibility for a failed project, or when she subtly dismissed my ideas in meetings while claiming credit for my work. Each memory stung sharper now, forming a pattern I could no longer ignore. The more I examined the details, the heavier the moral weight pressed on me. Could I expose her publicly, risk confrontation, and assert my vindication? Or should I take the high road and remain ethical, hoping that truth alone would prevail? The dilemma gnawed at me. Acting impulsively could jeopardize my career further, but silence risked letting injustice stand. My thoughts spiraled between anger, frustration, and careful calculation. Every scenario I imagined carried consequences, some satisfying, some dangerous, and I realized the choice wasn't just about revenge, but about protecting my future and integrity. Amidst the internal debate, a subtle hint emerged that shifted everything. During a brief call with the elite client who had attended the presentation, I detected a faint curiosity in their questions, a probing tone that suggested they noticed discrepancies. They asked about specific slides I hadn't even thought anyone had examined that closely. Their questions precise yet seemingly casual. It was a small but vital clue someone influential had paid attention. Someone who could validate the truth if I approached it strategically. That glimmer of hope sparked determination. If I could act thoughtfully and gather the right proof, perhaps I could reclaim control without losing credibility. I spent hours mapping my plan, balancing evidence with ethics, anger with caution. I imagined the confrontation carefully, weighing each word, each step, and each audience, knowing that this wasn't just about proving her wrong, it was about reclaiming my own dignity. As the first piece together the puzzle of betrayal, manipulation, and opportunity, a quiet resolve formed. I would not be a victim again. The path forward was unclear, but for the first time since that presentation, I felt the spark of empowerment, the faint thrill that justice, if carefully orchestrated, might be within reach. Over the next few days, I began to notice cracks in Elaine's carefully constructed facade. Small inconsistencies appeared in her emails and notes, contradictions in statements she had made to colleagues, and discrepancies in data she had claimed to prepare herself. I quietly compared them to my own records, tracing the subtle manipulations back to her. Each discovery, though minor on its own, felt like a small victory, a reminder that her control over the narrative wasn't absolute. For the first time since the disastrous presentation, I felt a flicker of confidence, a sense that the situation could be turned to my advantage. I began to prepare silently, documenting every instance of deception without drawing attention. I maintained my professional poise, engaging colleagues and clients with the same composure I had before, carefully masking the tension that simmered beneath the surface. Every conversation, every interaction with Aline became a calculated exercise in subtle observation. I took notes, cross-checked statements, and saved emails that proved her misrepresentation of facts. The more evidence I gathered, the more I realized that her carefully orchestrated sabotage could be exposed in a way that left no room for doubt. This was my first minor power reversal. While she believed she had successfully undermined me, I had quietly reclaimed control of the situation. Knowledge became my weapon, patience my shield. The small victories bolstered my resolve, transforming fear and frustration into strategic focus. I imagined the moment when the truth would surface, and the thought brought a quiet thrill, tempered by caution and the need for timing. Then, just as I was beginning to feel a tentative sense of momentum, An unexpected email appeared in my inbox from the elite client. The subject line was simple: "Can we speak privately?" My stomach tightened as I clicked it open, heart racing. Was this curiosity, concern, or something else entirely? I had no way of knowing yet, but the possibilities hung in the air, a tantalizing hint that the situation was about to shift again, and that the real turning point might be closer than I dared to hope. I arrived at the client's office feeling a mixture of apprehension and anticipation, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your palms clammy. The receptionist directed me to a sleek conference room, and when I stepped inside, the client's eyes met mine with a curious intensity. They gestured for me to sit, and I hesitated for a moment, wondering how much they had really noticed. I took a deep breath, reminding myself to stay composed, to keep my voice steady, and not let the embarrassment of the past week shadow this crucial conversation. As we spoke, they began casually referencing slides, numbers, and phrasing from the presentation that didn't align with my original work. The discrepancies were subtle, but their tone suggested they had noticed them. "I was reviewing your notes," they said, leaning back, and some parts seemed inconsistent. I wasn't sure if I misunderstood, but I thought it was worth asking. Relief flooded me in waves. For the first time since the disaster, someone influential saw what I had seen: the deliberate manipulation that had left me humiliated. Their questions weren't accusatory, but they were pointed enough to signal support. It was as if they were quietly giving me a chance to steer the narrative back in my favor without overtly taking sides. I felt the tension in my chest ease slightly, replaced by a cautious hope. For the first time, the possibility of vindication seemed tangible. Every careful word, every observation, felt like a bridge toward reclaiming the control that had been wrested from me. I left that meeting with a renewed sense of purpose. The subtle hints of backing from someone so influential gave me the courage to move forward strategically. The emotional relief was undeniable, but it was tempered by the knowledge that the confrontation was far from over. Elaine's deception still loomed, and the opportunity for a public, undeniable reversal had not yet arrived. The anticipation of what could come next, the payoff, the moment when truth would finally surface, hung in the air, electrifying and nerve-wracking all at once. Back at the office, I shifted into careful planning mode, determined to prepare a response that was precise, undeniable, and calculated. I started gathering documentation, emails, slide drafts, meeting notes, and traced every subtle alteration Elaine had made. Each piece of evidence became a weapon, though I reminded myself that discretion was crucial. I couldn't let her sense that I was onto her, or the carefully laid plan would unravel before it even began. Every conversation, every inquiry was measured, cloaked in civility and professionalism. I approached colleagues I trusted, framing questions casually. "Hey, can you confirm this slide from last week? I just want to make sure I didn't misinterpret anything." No accusations, no hints of my growing strategy, just careful verification. Some colleagues offered quiet nods, subtle acknowledgments that they, too, had noticed oddities, but had stayed silent. I followed their confirmations meticulously, building a network of silent witnesses without raising suspicion. The thrill of slowly regaining control, without revealing it, sharpened my focus and ignited a flicker of satisfaction. Elaine continued to act as if nothing was amiss. She smiled in passing, adjusted slides in meetings with her usual charm, and made comments meant to undermine my credibility, unaware that each move was being quietly recorded and documented. I restrained myself from confrontation, carefully choosing every word, every reaction. When she leaned over to correct me during a casual check-in, I smiled politely, thanked her for the input, and made mental notes of the exact phrasing, perfect evidence for when the time came. The tension in the office escalated with each passing day, though outwardly it remained invisible. I moved through the day with calculated patience, letting Elaine believe she had maintained control while quietly assembling the undeniable proof I would need. The sense of power building beneath my composed exterior was intoxicating, a quiet counterpoint to the humiliation I had endured. I felt the first real surge of agency since the presentation disaster, a mixture of anticipation and strategy that made each careful interaction feel like a small victory. The stage was being set, the pieces aligning perfectly, and the moment of truth drew closer with every cautious step I took. The day of the major review arrived with a weight that pressed on my chest like iron. The room was filled with the same elite clients from the ill-fated presentation, along with our executives and my entire team. My heart raced as I set up my materials, careful to keep my composure, while Elaine entered with her usual confident smile, unaware that the balance of power had already shifted. I could feel the tension crackling in the air, a quiet storm waiting to break. Every step she took, every greeting she offered, felt performative now, like the calm before a public unraveling she didn't suspect. The client, who had requested the private discussion days earlier, began the review, and I sensed immediately that they were in control of the narrative. They spoke deliberately, their questions precise and pointed, subtly drawing attention to the slides and data discrepancies that had been manipulated. I noticed some interesting differences between the original projections and the final presentation. They said, their eyes scanning the room as they spoke. Could someone clarify why these numbers don't match the supporting documentation? The room went quiet, all eyes shifting toward Elaine. Elaine faltered for the first time, attempting a charming deflection. But the client was relentless. They referenced emails, documented edits, and communications that perfectly illustrated the sabotage. Each fact was laid out clearly, leaving no room for ambiguity. The whispers started softly, then grew louder as colleagues began to piece together the truth. Elaine's confident smile faltered, then vanished entirely. She stammered, trying to regain control, but every attempt was met with calm, undeniable evidence. The tension in the room snapped like a taut wire, and I felt a surge of vindication that sent a shiver down my spine. I could hardly contain the mix of adrenaline and satisfaction as the client delivered the final blow. The moment when Elaine's manipulation was undeniable to everyone present. Their words hung in the air, precise and public, exposing the full extent of her deceit. My colleagues, who had quietly observed for weeks, nodded in acknowledgement, some with visible relief and others with stunned expressions. The tables had turned entirely. Elaine, who had once controlled the room with subtle charm and undermining tactics, was now visibly flustered, her authority evaporating in real time. The sense of empowerment that washed over me was overwhelming. Years of preparation, patience, and meticulous documentation had culminated in this single, public vindication. My credibility, which had been threatened, was fully restored, and the respect I had earned over years of work returned tenfold. The clients expressed renewed confidence in my abilities, acknowledging not only my expertise, but also my resilience and composure under pressure. Every glance, every nod reaffirmed the reversal of status, the restoration of dignity, and the public acknowledgement of justice. Elaine slunk back into her seat, her smirk replaced by a flush of humiliation and disbelief. The entire room had witnessed the truth, and the audience of colleagues, executives, and clients were silently aligned with me. In that moment, I realized the full weight of what had transpired, the humiliation I had endured, the careful planning, the patient collection of evidence. All had led to this apex of personal and professional triumph. I was no longer merely a participant in my own story. I was the orchestrator of justice, and the peak of empowerment coursed through me like electricity. The presentation that had once threatened to destroy my reputation had instead become the stage for a dramatic, undeniable reversal of fortune, leaving no doubt about who had truly earned respect and credibility in the room. The office was buzzing the following morning, though the energy was completely different. Where there had been whispers of doubt and tension, now there were nods of respect and quiet congratulations. Colleagues approached me with genuine warmth, some offering murmured apologies for doubting or underestimating me, others simply expressing relief that the truth had come to light. Every acknowledgement reinforced what I had known all along. The sabotage had not defined me, and my professionalism, patience, and careful planning had earned me the respect I deserved. Elaine, on the other hand, had become a cautionary tale overnight. Her attempts to maintain composure were painfully transparent. Her smirk vanished, replaced by the weight of her public exposure. The office, which she had subtly controlled with charm and manipulation, now viewed her through the lens of accountability. The contrast was stark. She had lost credibility, while I regained not only mine, but an elevated sense of authority. Watching her struggle to navigate the very colleagues she had once influenced gave me a quiet satisfaction, a sense of poetic justice that needed no dramatics. I took a moment to reflect privately at my desk, letting the adrenaline settle and the lessons sink in. I thought about the humiliation I had endured, the hours of preparation, and the patience required to turn a devastating situation into a triumph. Personal growth was evident. I had learned to observe carefully, act strategically, and maintain composure even under extreme pressure. My dignity, which had been challenged and nearly crushed, now felt fully restored, strengthened by the ordeal rather than diminished by it. Most importantly, I realized that respect and credibility were earned through consistency, intelligence, and ethical persistence. While Elaine had relied on manipulation, charm, and opportunism, I had relied on evidence, professionalism, and careful timing. The contrast underscored a fundamental truth. Those who act with integrity may face temporary setbacks, but long-term, justice and recognition have a way of prevailing. In the quiet aftermath, I felt a profound sense of closure, a mixture of relief, pride, and empowerment, knowing that not only had I survived the storm, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and fully vindicated. Even as I savored the validation and regained respect, a part of me couldn't ignore the emptiness that lingered. Elaine had faced the consequences of her actions: humiliation, loss of credibility, and the quiet judgment of our colleagues. But the triumph came with an unexpected ache. Some relationships, I realized, were irreparable. Trust that had been broken, subtly eroded over time and shattered in public, could not simply be restored. I had won the battle, but the war for genuine connection, for professional camaraderie built on honesty, had suffered permanent casualties. It was a sobering thought. Revenge could feel satisfying, but the true measure of justice wasn't in her downfall alone. Emotional justice, the acknowledgement of wrongs, the restoration of dignity, and the affirmation of my integrity was what mattered most. I had been humiliated, manipulated, and doubted, yet through patience, strategy, and calm perseverance, I had reclaimed my power without stooping to cruelty or malice. The victory was mine, but it was defined not by the destruction of another, but by the strength and composure I had maintained throughout. I reflected on the subtle irony of it all. The very ambition and charm that had once made Elaine seem untouchable had now isolated her, while my own persistence and ethical approach had fortified my standing. There was no gloating, no need for dramatic confrontation beyond what had already occurred. The moral clarity of the situation resonated deeply. Justice could be achieved without descending into vindictive theatrics. In that quiet reflection, I felt a profound sense of growth. I had learned to navigate treachery, to assert my worth, and to recognize which battles were truly worth fighting. Ultimately, the lesson was clear. Some wounds can't be fully healed, some relationships can't be mended, and some betrayals can't be forgiven. But through measured action and emotional resilience, it was possible to emerge with integrity intact and dignity reclaimed. I understood, perhaps for the first time fully, that true empowerment came not from seeing someone else fall, but from standing tall after being pushed down, and from proving to myself that I could survive, adapt, and rise stronger than before. In the weeks that followed, life at work settled into a new rhythm, one shaped by the hard-earned respect I had reclaimed. I was entrusted with a new high-profile project, a challenge that reflected not just my abilities, but also the trust my colleagues and clients now placed in me. The weight of past humiliation no longer lingered. Instead, it had been transformed into motivation, A quiet fuel that reminded me of how far I had come and how much I was capable of handling. Every task I approached felt infused with purpose. Every meeting a chance to demonstrate not only competence, but resilience. As I immersed myself in the project, I reflected on the journey that had brought me here, the betrayals, the careful strategizing, and the ultimate vindication. I realized that while the path had been painful, it had sharpened my instincts, strengthened my confidence, and revealed the importance of patience and ethical persistence. There was a newfound empowerment in knowing that I could navigate even the most toxic dynamics without losing sight of my principles or my dignity. It was a lesson that extended far beyond the office, into life itself. Resilience and strategic action could overcome even the most calculated attempts to undermine you. Yet, even in this moment of triumph, a small thrill of anticipation lingered. The new project was only the beginning, a chance to expand, to innovate, and to test the limits of my capabilities. The possibility of future challenges and known adversaries, unexpected twists, and opportunities for growth hung in the air. A subtle cliffhanger that left me both cautious and exhilarated. For the first time in a long while, I felt fully in control of my narrative, ready to face whatever came next with clarity, confidence, and the quiet satisfaction that comes from having endured, survived, and emerged stronger. Looking back, I realized that true justice isn't about revenge, it's about standing firm, gathering evidence, and letting truth and integrity prevail. The experience reinforced that patience, strategic thinking, and resilience can turn humiliation into empowerment, while manipulative actions are eventually exposed. In the end, karma, validation, and personal growth proved far more satisfying than fleeting victory over someone else, leaving me stronger, wiser, and fully in control of my own story.